button real quick and we're good to go. Right, so welcome to Fitness Mythbusters. If you've been to one before, welcome again. If not, I'm excited to have you here. I've been doing quite a few of these webinars since the past 2 or 3 years on a variety of different fitness topics. This is something that I love and I'm passionate about. I guess I should say who I am. So I'm Charles Burroughs, and I'm a fitness services coordinator for University Recreation here at UA. So I've been here for about 4 years now, and I've been working in fitness for close to 10 years. Been personal training, working with clients for about 8 years. I've had a chance to work in commercial fitness as a personal trainer, working in corporate wellness, doing very similar things to what Bama Health Promotion and Wellness does here. And then now I oversee the fitness programs and personal training programs that we have here at UA. So we offer personal training services for members at the rec center, whether it's students, faculty, staff, and also community members. So anyone with a membership can do personal training. Shameless shout out there. But I love this stuff. I love talking about fitness. This is something that gets me excited and something that I just enjoy chatting about. So if you ever have any questions about fitness, anything fitness related at all, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will be on the last slide of this page. I know this is more of a presentation, but I also love discussion. So feel free to throw out questions at any point. And like I said, if I'm in the middle of a thought, I'm going to wait a little bit, but I'll definitely have some moments to address any questions you have. If you've never watched the old show Mythbusters before, this is kind of how this show goes. Is basically we're going to bring up a common belief or thought about fitness, and then we're going to put it to the test. Some of it we'll even talk about the science behind it and ultimately come to a conclusion whether or not that saying or belief is in fact true, or if it's just a myth. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So saying number one, I wanted to start off with a big one that I feel like is really, really common and is talked about a lot. And the basic saying is that I'm overweight due to genetics or to bad genetics. This is something that I hear multiple times a year. I've heard it from quite a few members in my own family. Most of my family is overweight. And so it's very commonly thought and commonly believed that genetics play a significant role and is the ultimate deciding factor in our weight. We often look at our family history or even our current family members and decide, because of how my family has been in the past, that's just where I am and that's just who I am. And there's nothing that I can do either way to lose weight. So let's talk a bit about that. And I think one of the most important ways to address this is to first talk about this idea called the calorie equation. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this before, but even if you have, stay with me. And if you haven't before, awesome. This will be something you learn that's new. And it's a very simple concept, which basically says that our body requires energy, right? And that energy, it comes in the form of calories. When we say calories, we're just talking about a unit of energy. And the basic premise is that in order to function and to live and to do the basic things we do, we need energy, right? And so with a set amount of energy that we need every day, and I say set, it's not really set. It actually is very much changing based on what we need for a given day. But we have a certain amount of calories that we need. And as long as we meet that number of calories, our body basically stays the same in terms of weight, in terms of how much muscle. For the most part, it doesn't change. If we need 2,000 calories to get through the day, that's what our body requires, and we get 2,000 calories, then really nothing changes. And in an ideal scenario, that is basically how our body works. And one thing I want to drive home with this concept is it's not a theory. It's not anecdotal. This is tried and true science. It is something that we have observed repeatedly, not just on a broad scale, but literally under a microscope. We see that this is how our body operates. It needs energy, and we provide that energy. And as long as we match that energy need, we are going to either maintain our current weight, or if we exceed those calories, well, we'll get to that in a second. So the basic premise is that whatever calories that we eat, if that matches calories burned, then we are at homeostasis, right? We are at equal, we are at even. But if we burn more calories than what we actually consume, then most likely we're going to experience weight loss. In fact, we will experience weight loss. It's just whether or not that number is specifically measurable over a given time scale, right? If my body today needed 2,200 calories and I only ate 2,100 calories, then what my body is going to have to do is it's going to have to find energy elsewhere. And one awesome thing about our bodies, whether we like it or not, is our body's really good at storing energy. And it does so in a lot of different ways. It does that with our fat cells. It does it with blood sugar. It does it with something called muscle glycogen that we'll talk about here in a bit. But our body is really good about also storing energy to be used in case of emergency. It can't just go straight to food that was just eaten. Instead, it's got to be pretty smart about how we get that energy. And then lastly, if calories burned is less than what we consume, then that's when our body says, okay, I've got some extra stuff here. I got some extra calories and I might need that later. So I'm just going to store them. And again, that can be stored as either fat cells. It can be stored as, or in your muscles is what's called muscle glycogen that I mentioned a second ago. And so when we talk about different factors that affect weight loss or weight gain, what we're really talking about for the most part is factors that are affecting this calorie equation, something that is affecting how many calories that we burn or how many calories that we are taking in. Now, for simplicity's sake, we're going to mostly focus about calories burned because I think when it comes to eating, that's a lot more self-explanatory. You know, if you eat 500 calories, then you ate 500 calories, and then you have 500 calories to burn from food ingested, right? It's very straightforward in my opinion. And so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that. What I want to really dive into, though, is going to be factors that affect how many calories that we actually burn. Now, some of this stuff might be pretty obvious, one of them being exercise, right? But I'm actually going to broaden this factor and say really all physical activity, because I think a lot of times we sort of downplay how much our daily lives, everything else that we do also contributes to calories burned. Because remember, as we just said, that our body has energy needs and that really everything that we do to exist and to be alive requires calories. Our skins need energy in order to regenerate. You know, if we're growing hair, that requires energy. If we are using our brain, which we are, we need energy. There is a constant energy demand throughout our entire body. And so we need calories. So any kind of physical activity also requires calories. Anytime you get up and walk across the room, anytime you shift in your seat, anytime you move your hand to type on something, all of that requires calories. And the reason I want to point that out is a lot of times we don't think about all the other things that we do throughout the day that can contribute to the calories that we burn. And if we're trying to focus on losing some weight and to creating a caloric deficit where we're burning more than we're eating, then we can start to think about all the little things that contribute to that. You know, maybe I try to walk a little bit more today, right? Maybe I go inside the grocery store and pick up all my groceries rather than just pick it up. All these little things add up. And if we start being a little bit more intentional, right? There's 24 hours in a day. 1 hour of exercise is great. But if we can start being intentional about all those other hours throughout the day, what little things that we can add, that's going to ultimately help contribute to how many calories we burn. Another thing that also factors in is body size. And that makes sense, right? We're covered in tissues on our body. So it makes sense that the taller we are, the more that we weigh, whether that's muscle or fat or bones, maybe we just got heavy bones, whatever we got that contributes to our body size, that's going to burn more calories. If I've got one person standing next to me that's 5'10" and 20% body fat, and I got someone on my other side that's 6'10" and they are 20% body fat, the one that's 6'10" is going to burn a whole lot more calories. And that's simply because they've got a lot more tissues on their body that needs energy. So that does make sense. One other thing I'll say about that as well is that the kinds of tissues also affect how many calories we burn. And I don't want to dive in too deep here, but it's worth noting that muscle does burn a lot more energy than fat does. And in a way, if we think about it, it does make sense because fat is basically storage. It is energy storage. And so really it just needs energy to keep being a living cell, a living thing. But our muscles, they got to move, they got to work. And so muscles need a lot more energy in order to do that. Do you see a question? I'm going to check it real quick. Oh, no, we're good. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so other factors that affect calories burned. Age is also a factor. Typically, the younger you are, the more calories that you burn, and that is regardless of activity level. We're not entirely sure why, but it's just the fact of the matter. I think a big reason for that is, especially in those developmental years, you know, from 0 to 25, we're still developing and still growing. And so that in itself does require a lot more calories. Hormones also play a role in how many calories we burn. I wouldn't say it is quite as significant, but hormones can definitely affect also the way that we burn calories. And one example I have for that is specifically insulin. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of insulin, but one of the things that insulin does is it can actually slow down and prohibit the breakdown of fat tissue to be used as energy. And the reason that is interesting is that if our body needs some stored energy, and if insulin is there in large amounts, it can slow down that process and try to force our body to use other sources of stored energy. And that's not to say that we still can't burn fat if we have high levels of insulin, but it does mean that it makes it a little bit more challenging, a little bit more difficult. And most of us really aren't going to have an issue with insulin. That's going to be more related towards diabetics, and even then it's a little bit different. But just so you know that hormones can absolutely play a factor in the amount of calories we burn and really how our body looks to break down energy with calories. And then, of course, genetics does play a factor. You probably would have guessed that since that is the title of this, but it does play a factor here. It's something that we absolutely can't ignore. So instead, let's talk a little bit more about it and try to understand more of exactly how genetics can play a role in our metabolism in the way that we gain, lose weight, or stay the same. And so there's some really interesting research from the Harvard School of Public Health, and they did this massive meta-analysis of a lot of different research and also did some of their own studies as well with a ton of participants, like over, I think it was 140,000 participants in this study. So it was really well done and a lot of people involved. But one thing that they were able to show is that there is absolutely a genetic component when it comes to holding on to weight, and excessive amounts of weight especially. So it can be a genetic component to obesity. And in case you're curious, what they did is they actually took 70,000 sets of twins and started studying their body's ability to metabolize fat, how much fat they had on our bodies, and a lot more with that. But it was a really interesting study. And one of the things that they found is that genetics can predispose your body to obesity really through two different ways. One of them is through appetite control. There is a hormone in your body that's called leptin. And what leptin does is leptin is a satiating hormone. Whenever it is released in higher levels and our body is able to receive that hormone and accept it, it tells our brain, hey, our fat cells are full, we are satiated, we don't need to eat anymore. Now, it seems that there is a genetic component which can either lower the amount of leptin that we release or also lower the amount of leptin that we can actually absorb. In other words, we might have higher resistance to leptin. And so appetite control, there is a small genetic component that can exist there. And that's not to say that if we struggle to maintain or control our appetites, that leptin is the issue, but it definitely can play a role there. And so I think that in itself is worth pointing out. Another way that genetics can predispose or affect our ability to gain or lose weight is also metabolic efficiency. This one is a little bit more challenging to nail down to very specifics, but basically what this says is that genes can help determine how good our body is deciding which energy source to use and how quickly to use it. Without diving too deep into our energy systems, because that can be a whole nother topic, but basically our body resorts to different types of energy depending on the intensity of the activity that we're doing and how long that activity is. So a good example is that if we were doing a really low intensity activity, such as just like a slow walk, our body is going to be more adapt to use fat cells to break down and use for energy. And the reason is that that process of breaking fat down is actually pretty slow and is not efficient when it comes to needing energy quickly. So when we do something that's really fast or intense, our body instead results to what's called glycogen, where sugar is stored in these little storehouses in our muscles. And so the type of activity can determine which energy system that we use. But also, as we're talking about here, genetics does play a role there in just our body's ability to switch systems, to decide where to get it, decide where to use it, that kind of thing. So like I said, the exact specifics are a little bit hazy, but we do see it reoccurring in certain family lines. So genetics can play a role there. So what do we do with this information, right? I just told you that, hey, genetics can absolutely affect our ability to gain or lose weight, but what do we use with that information? One thing is worth noting is that genetics can make it more challenging to control appetite and or to burn calories efficiently. And that's not to say that our genetics are a reason or excuse to just not even try. The fact is that while it is a factor, that same research that showed us that also showed that weight loss is still equally attainable regardless of genetics. So I think the easiest way to look at this is like, okay, what if we do have that genetic predisposition to have a harder time controlling our appetite? What it really means is that we've got to be a little bit more intentional on the types of strategies that we implement and the type of things that we do to help control that. Some people, they eat a certain amount of food and they just already feel full. They feel satiated. That leptin hormone is doing its job and they're very easy to say, okay, I'm full and I'm done. For others, that might not necessarily be there, or it might take longer for that hormone to be released and to be accepted by the body to actually say, hey, I'm full. And so part of that is implementing strategies and things that we can do and having to, I guess, use a bit more active thought and self-control to do that, because it's not always going to be our body that says, hey, yes, you're full. Sometimes it's going to have to be ourselves to say, hey, I've got to decide I'm done, even though that hormone hasn't quite caught up yet or hasn't quite said I'm full. So it requires a bit more of strategy. I think this is really, more than anything, something that's just worth being aware of. That, hey, just because I ate a full meal and I still feel really hungry, doesn't mean I didn't get enough food. It's just a matter of my brain catching up and realizing that, hey, I am actually full. And another important thing that research showed us is that environment and physical activity are ultimately the greatest factors that affect our weight loss, and really the factors that we can control as well. We haven't really talked about environment up much to this point, but really environment is just going to be everything from our home life, our work, what we spend our time doing, what's around us, right? Literally the definition of environment. And I point that out because in a way, that's one of the most important strategies that we can start to implement if our goal is to lose weight. Really, if it's to change any kind of behavior, is how can we affect our environment or improve our environment to help make that happen? And I'm not saying that we need to alienate a part of our lives if it's not helping towards a certain goal, but it's worth trying to be aware of these things and trying to figure out how can I surround myself, whether it's work, whether it's in our social circles, how can I surround myself with the right environment to be successful? And that's one reason that people are so successful when they join things like CrossFit, right? We hear that CrossFit is so popular. And one of the biggest reasons that CrossFit is popular is not because, and no one sue me over this, it's not because it's extremely effective, although it can be, but the most successful part of CrossFit is the simple fact that it creates that environment for success. That is what people see so much progress from doing different kinds of programs, whether it's 9 rounds or CrossFit or whatever else. A lot of it comes down to the environment and our ability to surround ourselves with the right kind of people or things that are going to make us successful. And so if you don't get anything else out of this, think about what can I do in my current environment to help make me successful in whatever goal it is to achieve, not just weight loss, but anything. because environment is a very crucial role there. So to the saying or belief that I'm overweight due to bad genetics, that myth is busted. While it definitely plays a role here and definitely can make it harder, sometimes life isn't fair like that. We've got to find ways to try to combat it and work for it. I know that my life from early childhood up until college years, I was overweight. And I was completely convinced that that was never going to change and that it was just genetic. My mom told me it was genetic. My grandma told me it was genetic. They said that's just how our family is. But those things can predispose us to excess weight, or it can also be the reverse, why it can be a lot harder to gain weight. But those things aren't ultimately the deciding factor. What are going to be the types of activities we do and the type of environment we put around us. That's going to ultimately be the deciding factor. All right. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to keep going on. But again, if you have any questions about that one, absolutely don't be afraid to pop them in the chat. All right. Belief number 2, I need running shoes to work out. Now, I said belief instead of saying, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about running shoes with working out. But when we think of athletic shoes or even tennis shoes, 90% of the time, we're actually talking about running shoes. For whatever reason, running shoes have absolutely dominated the fitness market. I bet every single one on this call has a pair of running shoes, whether or not they actually run. I know a big portion of my own athletic shoes are actually running shoes. They are made and designed for running. And so basically what I'm saying here is this idea or belief that we absolutely need the kind of shoes that we associate with athletics and working out, or running shoes, in order to work out. So I think in order to tackle this or talk about this, we need to first understand running shoes and what's special or unique about them and why everyone has them. So running shoes are going to have a lot more cushion than just like a regular non-athletic shoe, or even a very basic athletic shoe, which we'll talk about here in a bit. Running shoes are also extremely lightweight. I think that in itself makes them really appealing to most people. The cushion and the lightweight is just ideal for most scenarios, right? They're easy to walk in, they feel comfortable. Running shoes are also going to have a lot of flexibility. They are made to be able to move with our feet. And they're also going to be extremely breathable. So they're usually going to be made of some sort of thin plastic or mesh. That way that our feet don't sweat too much, which is perfect for running, right? Especially if we're running for long periods of time. We don't want our feet to get too sweaty. And then also running shoes are going to be usually pretty durable. So when we think about all these different characteristics, that also just sounds good for a shoe, right? If we're going to wear shoes a lot, we want them to be durable. We don't want our feet to sweat. We want them to be pretty lightweight because that just feels nice when we're walking. But is that the right shoe to work out in? So running shoes are going to be really good for specific activities. One is going to be any kind of long duration physical activity. Walking, they're going to be totally fine for. Jogging, running, sprinting, any kind of activity that is long in duration. And also that's going to be either high impact or repeated impact. So walking isn't necessarily high impact, but it's definitely repeated, especially if you do it for a long period of time. Similarly with high impact, so like sprinting, jumping, a lot of activities like that, it is beneficial to have shoes that have a lot of cushion. And that's one big aspect of running shoes, right, is that they have a lot of cushion. But what is this not necessarily good for? Running shoes are actually not ideal for any kind of rapid change in direction. So for example, if you're wanting to play like football or soccer, where you're running one direction, you've got to stop quickly and change directions. Running shoes are actually not good for that. They are not made to be able to handle a lot of sideways force. And so if you're not careful in those kind of shoes, you can roll your ankle really easily. You can also tear the seams in the shoe, and it also wears them down a lot faster if you're using it for that kind of activities. So running shoes are not going to be ideal for sports like basketball or even baseball, but especially like basketball or any kind of change in direction. They're also not ideal for any kind of activity that requires a lot of joint stability. Specifically, what I'm going to be talking about is heavy lifting where we want to make sure we are stable, right? Because we're dealing with a lot of weight, and that lot of weight can definitely be risky on our body because any amount of force going the wrong way can definitely pull something or tweak something. And running shoes are not ideal for any kind of heavy lifting. So if you plan on, moving one day, I wouldn't necessarily wear running shoes for that. That's going to make your feet less stable, and as a result, your ankles less stable, and can actually cause you to roll your ankle or just lose a step. So any kind of heavily padded shoes are not ideal for heavy lifting. And if you're just starting any kind of like resistance training or getting into it, I usually don't recommend running shoes for that reason. It's going to add an extra component where we're a lot less stable. It's going to make our knees a lot more wobbly. You'll notice that if you wear running shoes, when you do exercises like squats or lunges, you're going to feel a lot less stable. And it's because there's so much cushion in those shoes that it actually can cause you to wobble quite a bit. So know the difference with the shoes. I'm going to show you 3 basic examples. These are the most common within fitness. And one thing I'll say here, right, is that you can probably wear running shoes in a regular class or workout. Maybe you've done it for years and have never experienced a problem, and that's okay. But one thing that I'll say is that there's a reason these shoes are made a certain way. And while we might not experience any negative outcomes continually wearing running shoes while weightlifting or something like that, they do increase the risk of issues. And so there's no benefit to wearing a running shoe if we're lifting heavy weight. It might not ultimately hurt us. We might be stable enough, but it's not really worth the risk, in my opinion. And if you have a little extra income, or if you're willing to get a different pair of shoes, I would recommend it. It can just be a little bit safer and a little bit more efficient that way. So some examples of different kinds of shoes for sports and athletics. One is going to be weightlifting shoes. That top picture is a good example of one. The main thing that we're looking for when we're doing any kind of heavy lifting in the gym is that they're going to be much more stable. This one in particular has like a little bit of an elevated heel, but for the most part, it is very, very stable. If you ever try these shoes on, you'll notice that they're very stable. They're not going to move around. There's not a lot of cushion. I wouldn't want to wear these shoes to go for a run or to go jumping or anything like that because there's not going to be any kind of cushion or support, but that's because I want it to be very stable so that my ankles and knees are also stable. Cross-training shoes is sort of a middle ground that you'll see a lot. When someone comes to me and says, hey, what kind of athletic shoes should I have for just a good catch-all? I usually recommend cross-training shoes. That's because they have more cushion than a weightlifting shoe, but they're also going to be more supportive and reinforce better for things like changing direction and activities where it might need a little bit more support and not be as lightweight. That is a trade-off here. Cross-training shoes are going to be a little heavier than a running shoe, but it's because they're going to be more supportive. So it's just kind of a happy middle ground. And then with running shoes, we've already kind of talked about, but they are going to be a lot more thick soled. They're going to be a lot more cushiony. And they're also going to be a little bit more curved. One thing that you'll notice here, we haven't really gotten into, and I'm not going to get into all the biomechanics of it, but running shoes typically have a really upturned front half of the shoe. They're going to be turned like this. And that's to help with running motion and to help ease the stress of running. That's one reason that they're shaped that way. So if you shoot, and Hoka's are a great example. They're really, really popular right now, and for good reason. They're really well-made shoe. But just know that Hoka's or Brooks or these type of running shoes, they're not ideal for any kind of sport or resistance training where a lot of weight is involved or a lot of changing directions involved. But anyways, those are 3 main types of shoes. If you do one activity a lot, I really recommend getting a shoe that's made for that. If you do a lot of weightlifting, go ahead. It's really worthwhile to invest in a pair of shoes that are more stable. And one great example of a weightlifting shoe is just Chuck Taylor's. Those are really common. You'll see those a lot in the gym. That's because they're very flat and very stable. So you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a special weightlifting shoe. In this case, any kind of flat soled shoe will work. Cross-training shoe is just a great catch-all, like I said. And if you're a runner, definitely get yourself some running shoes. It's going to be a lot more kind to your knees and ankles. So some other quick considerations on this. One is that our feet are designed for balance and for dynamic movement. We've got over 26 bones in each foot. We've got over 100 ligaments and over 19 muscles in each foot. There's a lot going on. They're made to be dynamic, to flex, and to move. And so I really recommend looking for opportunities to be barefoot when possible. I'm not saying to go run barefoot or to come to work in your bare feet. I don't think your boss will like that too much. But look for opportunities to walk around the house barefoot. Go to a yoga class and take your shoes off. Look for opportunities to strengthen and engage your feet so they're not always walk around in a protected bubble with padding on it, because that can definitely make our feet a lot weaker and also doesn't help with our body awareness. So I really recommend spending some time around the house, being barefoot, and use your feet a little bit more. Any questions about athletic shoes before moving forward? All right, we will keep moving. Do I need running shoes to work out? No, you don't. If you're running, sure, get some running shoes. But for other activities, just try to find a cross-training shoe, especially for just broad general working out. I really recommend it. Absolutely. All right, moving on to the next one. This saying is that you need to eat 30 minutes after a workout to get the best results. This is really, really common, especially in the fitness industry. I actually remember in my undergrad when I was studying kinesiology that they taught this. They said that the best time to get the best results after a workout is to eat 30 minutes after. It is believed that there's this short anabolic window after exercise in which your muscles are more absorbent to protein and to building muscle, that any carbs that you eat right after a workout are instantly absorbed and used for energy, and that calorie burning is a lot higher after exercise. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Eating after exercise does absolutely refuel our body, right? We just did a lot of activity, and as we talked about, activity burns calories, and we need calories to do that. So right after exercise, we need to replenish that. It replenishes that energy that's stored in our muscles called muscle glycogen. It helps to rebalance our blood sugar if we used a lot of that sugar, and we usually do in any kind of physical activity. It helps to regulate our hormones, and it helps with protein synthesis. And that's not just for building muscle, but also just for repairing it. So even if our goal isn't to build or put on muscle, we still need protein because we want to refuel those muscles that we did damage during exercise, which we usually do. Prior research has shown that that short metabolic window occurs right after exercise. But interestingly enough, that research was done in a very specific context. Basically, what they did is they took people who had been fasted for, I think it was like 8 hours, and then they had them work out. And then right after, they would have them eat. And then with another group, they would have them work out, and they would wait a couple hours longer and then have them eat. So they went through this really, really long fasted state. However, a lot more research has been done since then. And what they found is that eating any time from 2 hours before to 8 hours after a workout is totally fine, especially if we're not in a fasted state. There's not this magical window right after exercise where if we wait an hour or two and miss it, that we're not going to get the same benefits. Our body still needs to replenish all those energy things that we talked about, regardless if it's 30 minutes after, 2 hours after, or 8 hours after. It's really that simple. Now, a few other considerations here to think about, though. One is that we really should think about the kinds of foods that we're using to refuel after exercise. So that can that needs to be all three of the main macronutrients: protein, carbs, and fat. All those absolutely need to be replenished, right? Protein helps with protein synthesis or muscles. Fats help with hormone regulation and feeling satiated. And also carbohydrates are really important because that is our main and most important energy source. So we definitely want to get those carbs in to refuel. Another thing to consider is that simple carbs can help with blood sugar issues during exercise. If you go really, really intensely and you start to feel lightheaded, you start to feel nauseous, A lot of times what's happening there is we are using up a lot of the blood sugar or a lot of the sugars that are in our blood, and we need to replenish that. So especially if you feel lightheaded, there's a good chance that not enough sugar or glucose is getting to our brain. And so some simple sugars such as like fruit or like Gatorade, that can help to replenish that blood sugar if it gets really low. Also kind of going along with that is that, if you feel like you're getting really tired in your workouts, one way to help with that is to have some simple carbohydrates, some simple sugars before a workout. Usually it's recommended to do that anywhere from like 2 hours before to 30 minutes before. I don't recommend eating a bunch of carbs during a workout, but doing that before can absolutely help with some energy during the workout. So that is one way you can kind of prepare for your workouts beforehand and try to get a little bit extra energy, is having some simple carbs beforehand. I do see a question real quick, so I'm going to look at it. All right, one person asked, does the 2 hours before up to 8 hours after apply to protein powder drinks? Yes, it does. So that research showed that you can have a protein shake 2 hours before a workout and that still be helpful in muscle recovery after. That protein will still be present in your body and can still be used to rebuild muscle. Now, would I personally recommend drinking a protein shake before a workout? Not necessarily. That's my own personal opinion, just because it's kind of filling and kind of full. And I don't know if I'd want to have a full stomach doing that. Although 2 hours is probably enough time, that wouldn't be an issue. I like to have that after a workout, but you could have it 2 hours before and it's going to give you the same outcome. So yes, in terms of when is the best time, anytime in that window is going to work. I would say the least desirable time is going to be an hour before to during the workout, but 2 hours before and any time after, totally fine. If it's within that window, it will still be applicable. Now, having a protein shake 24 hours after workout is not going to have the same benefit in terms of being absorbed and directly used in protein synthesis. But that 2 hours before, 8 hours after, absolutely. Any time in there will work. And if anything, I hope that's encouraging because it really gives you a lot more flexibility. I've had a lot of clients that like beat themselves up if they didn't have that protein shake right after their workout or something like that. But there's a lot more flexibility than we realize. And hopefully a lot more people come to realize that. There's definitely more flexibility as long as we're getting it within a reasonable time frame that we already talked about. If fasted during a workout, so maybe you obviously didn't eat during the night because you're asleep, and then you didn't eat breakfast, and then you go work out, I would try to get that protein sooner after the workout because we haven't eaten much at all. But it's not absolutely necessary. Just try to keep it in that window. If you keep it in that window, you'll still be fine. And then lastly, listen to your body after workouts. I see this more as an issue with people who've been in fitness a really long time, but a lot of times people just try to force it. If you just worked out, you're not hungry, you're feeling kind of nauseous, don't push yourself to have a protein shake. Usually our body is pretty smart about telling us what it needs. Not always. We talked about leptin and all that kind of stuff, but generally speaking, our body's pretty smart about this kind of stuff. And if we're not really hungry, we can wait 30 minutes. We can wait an hour. We can wait 2 hours after a workout or even longer before we have something. There's not this strict window that we think. It is much broader. And so listen to your own cravings and what your body desires rather than just trying to force some carbs or force the protein shake right after. Any questions about that before we move on? That was a great question. So do you need to eat immediately or within 30 minutes of workout? No, that is not true. Myth busted. There's a lot bigger window there and with a lot more freedom to do that. But we still need to do it. Don't get me wrong, just bigger window. All right, next one. Taking supplements is necessary to reach your fitness goals or to reach your goals. So there are tons and tons of fitness and exercise supplements out there, like a ridiculous amount. And the longer that you're in fitness or in this industry, the more that you see all the wild stuff that's out there. Just within the protein category, we've got powders, we got bars, we've got shakes. They make protein chips, they make protein cookies, they make everything you can think of out of protein, or at least inject some extra protein in it. Within that category, there are different kinds of protein. There's whey protein, casein, soy, egg, plant. They even make an animal protein where they take meat and then they extract the protein and then make that into a powder, which I don't know why you would want to do that opposed to just having meat. If you're vegetarian, you wouldn't have meat protein anyways. So it's very bizarre to me, but I digress. There's also BCAAs for protein intake and other amino acids. We see pre-workouts that are full of caffeine, beta-alanine, citrulline, nitric oxide. We see performance supplements like choline, carbs, and not food carbs, like they actually make powdered carbs, creatine. We also see different supplements for recovery like HMB, L-glutamine, glycerol, electrolytes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are tons and tons of supplements out there. So how do we deal with all this stuff, and do we need it? First off, let's talk about what they actually do. Really, we can take most exercise supplements and put them into two categories. One is going to be performance related. So our pre-workouts are going to be there. Anything that says to help boost performance. Those things are typically going to have these four things in them. One is that they're going to be a stimulant. So they're going to stimulate our central nervous system. They're going to make us feel more energetic, more gung-ho to do the workout. They're going to increase blood flow and oxygen exchange, or at least the rate of oxygen exchange. They're going to increase stamina. So they're going to make us a lot of times feel like we can keep exercising longer. And then in some cases, they can help increase strength, or at least they're touted to do that. One specific one that can help increase strength is going to be creatine, but that's going to be very specific circumstances. I'm not going to dive into that, but just know that there is a supplement out there that can increase strength. And then also there's going to be supplements for recovery, and I kind of put protein/recovery. And those are going to be supplements that help to increase protein synthesis or building muscle. They're going to help boost recovery or make it a little bit quicker. There are some that are touted to help reduce muscle soreness, muscle fatigue. And so those are the two broad categories that we see in in fitness supplements. Really, they're dividing those two in some form or fashion: recovery or performance. So are these needed, right? Do we actually need these? The word supplement itself actually tells us a lot, right? A supplement is something that completes or enhances something else when added to it, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. Exercise supplements can absolutely contribute to our success. They can help ease problematic areas and help address deficiencies. So for example, let's say that I've figured out I need 150 grams of protein a day to gain muscle. So in order to do that, though, maybe I'm only currently getting 120 grams of protein a day. And I say, well, it's really challenging for me to go, cook an extra chicken breast or whatever it is to get that additional protein. If my only goal is to get a little bit more protein, then a protein supplement can absolutely help. Let's be real, it makes it a lot easier. In a lot of ways, just putting some powder in water, shaking it up and drinking that can be a lot more convenient when it comes to hitting a very specific goal. In similar fashion, having a pre-workout or even like a cup of coffee before workout, if that's what makes me feel a little bit more energetic and as a result makes me perform a little bit better, sure, that can absolutely help. Why not? But I think it's really important to understand that supplements cannot fix a poor diet, and supplements should be treated as what they are, a supplement. They should not really be a replacement. I've seen this happen a lot. I even saw this in myself when I first started working in fitness, as I got so reliant on the convenience and ease of supplements that I started just having protein shakes and protein bars to replace meals. And the problem with that is we want to realize is that supplements are really designed for a very specific purpose, right? A protein supplement is made to provide protein. A protein supplement is not made to provide all the things that we see in regular foods that we eat. A great example of this is going to be like, say, a piece of fruit, right? Let's say like a strawberry. yes, a strawberry is a source of carbs. What could be dangerous is to say, oh, well, if I just replace strawberries with this carb supplement, then they're basically equal, right? I'm still getting my carbs and that's all that matters. But that's not true. Strawberries have a lot of other stuff in them. They've got antioxidants, they've got vitamins, they've got fiber. And so we need to have a lot more well-balanced and rounded diet in order to address all these other needs that our bodies have. And I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to dive into the specifics of nutrition, but I think it's important to understand that it's really easy to fall for this trap of relying on supplements to achieve results and to get us where we want to go. And so that's one reason I want to talk about this, is to really avoid that pitfall. Don't let protein shakes and protein bars start to become your diet and become your norm, because they are not made for that. They're not designed for that. They're there to help ease the process and to make getting to our goals easier. So are they needed for exercise? No, they're not. You can absolutely work out without a supplement. You can absolutely increase your strength without creatine. You don't need nitrous oxide to help you run farther or faster. You don't need protein powder in order to build muscle. Those things are there because it eases the process and makes things easier. But don't rely on it as your sole source of food. Don't rely on it as your sole source of reaching your goals. Don't feel like because you ran out of protein powder, you're not going to reach your goals. You can still get there, absolutely. There are some other important considerations here I want to touch on. First off, I really recommend asking the question, can I get this through my normal diet, through the normal things that I eat on a daily basis? Is it that much harder to eat a little bit more of this or to add this in order to get those carbs or to get that protein? Can I just have that cup of coffee instead of buying this pre-workout from the store? What can I do that isn't necessarily relying on these supplements? Supplements can be pricey. I've known a lot of people that spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month on supplements. So ask yourself, do I absolutely need this and can I get it elsewhere? And if I can't, or if it's extremely inconvenient, then sure, why not utilize a supplement? One thing that I'll say though, it's worth mentioning is that the supplement industry is really, really poorly regulated. There is not a lot of laws and legislation surrounding that market. And while we can sit here and debate on whether or not that's a good thing, one thing I'll say is that it also means that supplement makers have a lot of freedom when it comes to what they put in their stuff. They are not required to include all the ingredients on the label, and they're not looked at very closely on what is actually put in there. Right? Not only just what on the label, but what's actually in the supplement. A lot of companies can get away with just putting proprietary recovery blend, and we have no idea what's in that blend. It could be something really beneficial. It could just be sawdust, and we don't really know. And I point this out because I've witnessed this firsthand. One of my really good friends from college, after he graduated, decided to go start a supplement company. He did a lot of research on exercise supplements and found that there was a lot of weird stuff in supplements that had no use. And so his goal was to go out and start a company that was very transparent on what they put in there. And so they were quite successful for a couple of years, him and his business partner. They started doing really well. And then his other business partner and other partners they brought in decided that it became really expensive to do it that way. And they wanted to start cutting corners and finding ways to make a little bit more money and to make it a little bit cheaper. And as a result, they started changing their formula. They started doing this proprietary blend thing. And they started adding in some stuff to fluff it up and to make it a little bit cheaper to make. And as a result, he finally withdrew from the company and quit. And that's just one story from this industry. There are tons of others. But all that to say is just be careful. Do your research. If someone recommends a supplement, or if you look something up and you're like, oh, I want this because it's going to make me run faster, it's going to make me build muscle quicker, do your research. Look for different journals or articles that exist on this product and see if there's any legitimacy to it. My first gym that I worked at, we used to sell this product called glutamine, and we told everyone that they needed it. We're like, you need this because it's going to help reduce muscle soreness. It's going to help boost muscle recovery. It's going to help you recover faster and be ready for your workouts quicker. We used to tell everyone that. I used to tell my own clients that because that's what my boss told me, and I believed it. However, once I finally started doing research on glutamine, I started to realize that there's no actual proof that it helps. We know that our body naturally produce glutamine, and that can help with recovery. But there's actually nothing to show that if we try to ingest it, that our stomach will actually absorb it and it can actually be used for something. And really, in fact, there's a few studies that show that it doesn't do anything at all, except for a slight placebo effect. There's really nothing. And so that supplement that we were charging $45 for that would last you a month was actually doing nothing for recovery at all. So all that to say, do your research, look into the supplements that you're taking, make sure that it's actually worth the money that you're putting into it, because it can absolutely be expensive. And we're heavy reliance on these supplements. We've kind of already talked about this, but it can result in some deficiencies that we don't expect, right? If we start to rely on a powder instead of something in its natural form, there may have been something that we were getting from that we didn't realize, right? Maybe we were eating a lot of fish for protein. Well, fish also has a lot of healthy fatty oils, right? Those oils can be very beneficial for a lot of the things in our body. So just be careful on becoming too reliant on these really quick, easy supplements out there and thinking that they're healthy when really they're not necessarily helping us reach our ultimate goals. So taking supplements is necessary to reach your fitness goals. Nope, myth busted. It can help, it can supplement, it can assist us in the process, but we need to be careful with it. We need to understand that it's there to assist and not to be the primary source of whatever it is. It shouldn't be our only source of protein. It shouldn't be our only source of carbs. It needs to just be something that helps us reach our goals. All right. So any questions about anything we've talked about today? I wanted to finish a little early so that we have time to answer questions. If you don't have any questions, then thank y'all so much for coming today. Let's see. I think I got a question. Let me look. All right. The question is it true? Oops, lost it. There it is. Okay. Is it true that doing cardio after weight training is better for building muscle, cutting fat, than doing your cardio as a warm-up? That is actually not true. And I'm glad you asked that, because that is a very common belief. I think I covered that in a Fitness Mythbusters like 2 or 3 years ago, but that's actually not true. The only thing that matters when we're choosing the order of the workout, like if we're going to do weights and we're also going to do cardio, the only thing that matters is just to understand that the most energy we're going to have and use is going to be for that first activity, right? So if our goal is to get stronger, then I would recommend doing weights first, because that's when we have the most stored energy in our body to use. If I do an exhausting weightlifting session first, and then I go and do cardio after, that cardio is not going to be as effective because I'm not going to be able to put as much energy in it, and vice versa. But in terms of building muscle or weight loss, the results aren't going to change all that much. It's really just how much I can put into that activity. The ultimate outcome is not going to be all that different. So if I do the exact same workout routine, the same weight, the same reps, and then I do the same cardio, same amount of time, and I do one before the other and then switch it, nothing's going to change outcome-wise. The only thing that's going to change is really just, the amount of effort that you can put in. That's the only thing that changes. And if you're not giving like 110% and going all out, it's not really going to make a difference. That's a great question. All right, any other questions? I'm still going to hang out, answer any questions that might pop up. Yes, glad I could answer that. Thanks for asking. This is recorded, so I know that they'll usually upload this on the website or have a link to it. And if anyone wants access to the PowerPoint, I can definitely make sure they get that. But I'll hang her out still in case we got more questions. Happy Friday, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, especially if you're leaving for the day or about to go have lunch. I know I'm hungry. I'm sure you guys are too. Or maybe you're eating right now. That's a good call. Eat during a webinar. Let's see. Someone else had a question. Do you have a protein type or brand that you recommend? That's a good question. Whey protein is usually a good fitness supplement. Whey protein is very effective at being absorbed and used for building muscle. One brand that I personally like is Gold Standard or On Nutrition. I'm not a spokesperson for those brands, but what I found is that they are higher quality. They share the ingredients thoroughly. They're not putting any fillers in those. So Gold Standard and On Nutrition, those are two really good brands that I highly recommend. You're going to pay a little bit more, but I'll be honest, guys, if you're not paying, I wouldn't recommend the cheapest protein powder, just because a lot of times there's just extra stuff in there that you don't necessarily need. I would really recommend spending a few extra dollars and buy the higher quality brands. It's usually worth it, just from my own personal experience. And from some of the research I've read on just like them analyzing the ingredients, you're a lot less likely to find extra stuff in the more expensive brands. So Gold Standard and On, those are two really good brands. I'm sure there are more out there that are good. Those are just two that I've personally had success with. Good question. All right, any other questions? I'll still hang out for 2 more minutes just in case. Well, while I'm sitting here, don't forget to check out some of the other stuff that Fitness Services has over at UREC. We've got group exercise, we do personal training. We also have something called Tide Strong, where we do different fitness related programs every semester. So for example, starting next month, we're doing a personal training certification prep course where participants will learn everything that they need to pass the ACE certification exam. Spots are filling up really quick. I just had to extend it this morning to add a few more spots. So if that's something you might be interested, or you know some students that might be interested, it's $99 for anyone that already has a membership or is a student. It's a little bit more for non-students, but that includes a membership to this rec while you're coming. But like I said, we have programs every semester. So if you're ever interested in stuff like that, definitely check out our website and see what else we have to offer. But unless we have any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I'm Charles Burroughs with Fitness Services over at UREC, and happy you tuned in today. Have a wonderful day, guys.